My name is Christopher Fee. My pronouns are they, she, and he, and I am a volunteer with UPlift Black and the coordinator for UPlift Proud. UPlift Black is rooted in 2S LGBTQIA+ inclusivity, and as such, we are working to help to uplift queer voices within the broader community, as well as within the Black community specifically. We are working to ensure that everyone shares power in space. UPlift believes that diverse communities thrive. They are places where everyone is honored, has dignity, and is able to be their authentic selves without persecution. This Pride Month, we are doing a series that will showcase powerful Black queer voices within the community. Often, Pride spaces are white-centric. We are either fighting for queer rights or Black rights, but we are never fighting for both. In 2016, when Black Lives Matter stopped the Pride Parade in Toronto, many of my white queer friends suggested that it was not their place to do so. But I know that that's not true, because Black queer people exist. What about the people that sit at the intersection of Black and queer identities? As a white, queer person, I know that I hold power. I am listened to, at the very least, during Pride Month. My experience is not overlooked in conversations about queer and trans rights. So I want to make sure to use my voice to uplift the experiences I do not know. I want to know more about what it means to be Black and queer. I can help by giving the space to have these meaningful conversations. Please enjoy this series of conversations with Black queer folks who are out in the world being authentically Black and queer and proud. Listen, learn, and activate.
All right, well, welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much for coming. We're excited to have you here. Okay, so first, I want to start off. I saw that you do Motivational Mondays. Can you provide us with some motivation for this Monday?
Motivation for this Monday: be forgiving of who you were and accepting of who you are. Just random off the top, that's how I'm feeling today.
I love that. Oh, I love that. Okay, it's beautiful. It's beautiful. Thank you. Thank you for imparting some wisdom. I love that. Motivation.
I mean, I feel like I've gone through sort of a little bit of a journey where you learn to accept yourself and you maybe learn to see, okay, these are my faults. These are things I'm great at. You sit in it. And then maybe it changes. It could be weeks, it could be months, it could be years. And that's something I never understood. I thought, like, once I got there, I was there. I didn't realize there could be different no matter what day, month, week we're in. So I think it's important to kind of share that knowledge. If there's anybody else that thinks like, I got there and now I'm slipping back and it's a back and forth, it's cyclical, I feel like.
Yeah, that's fair. Actually, I feel that a lot. Like, the cyclical nature of it too is like, oh, I feel like, oh, I've gotten to this place where I'm like, oh, I'm back to what I was before. And I feel like that's such a bad place to be in, but that's not a bad place necessarily. You're still moving forward, right?
Exactly.
Oh, that's beautiful. I love it. Okay, so I want, if you don't mind telling us about yourself, I want to give you a chance to explain who you are and what you do or anything like that, parts of your identity, whatever you want to explain to us, just so that we know who you are.
Okay. My name is Camille. I do prefer flex simply because I've heard it for most of my life. And when you say Camille, it's kind of like I'm in trouble. I will accept it, but sometimes I get a little bit of like, uh-oh, what did I do? I am 35 and I will be 36 very, very soon. So I'm telling everyone 35 as much as I can. I am a cisgender female. I'm a lesbian and I identify as a stud. So if people don't know what that is, that's a term for masculine presenting women of color. Some people might argue only Black. There's some discussion there, but yeah, you can look up more on that if you're interested. By day, I'm a contracts analyst, so sort of like a desk jockey / nerd, super geek. I'm like literally in Excel and PDF all day. But in all of my other time, I'm working on a project that's called the 100 Project. It's not for profit, so that's this right here. It's everywhere. I'm always branding. And we're basically working on sharing the perspective of masculine presenting women, creating a different narrative, showing that, there's a range of us right now in the media and what you generally see mainstream types of things. There's maybe like one, starting to see another type of stud or masculine presenting women. So just sharing that, we come in all different shapes and sizes and forms.
I don't know that I realized that stud is a specific term to the Black community. That's interesting.
Yeah, for sure. There's the intersectionality there, of course. So not to misquote anything, but just very generally, the term is, from what I understand, and again, there's different sources that you'll find, but majority of the sources you'll find will say that it does come from the African American community, and it does come from the lesbians, or what were the butches, the tomboys, whatever you want to call us. And there are a lot of people that would be very offended to see somebody who is white to say, hey, I am a stud. And then there's also the opposite, where there's a lot of people that will call their white masculine presenting friends studs. I would say it's like anything else. If you don't know somebody, or if you're, in a situation that you're not necessarily sure what to do, you're going to always err on the side of caution. So I would say only use it when you're referring to masculine presenting women of color or Black.
Beautiful. Thank you for expanding. First of all, I wanted to ask, do you identify as queer, or is that something that is a little bit, I'm not putting words in your mouth. Do you identify as queer?
Yeah, for me, I look at queer as sort of the way that we collectively refer to ourselves. I know a lot of people, whether you're gay, lesbian, trans, even just one step footed, maybe I had a bisexual moment one day, they may identify as queer. So I kind of look at it as more of an umbrella term, and I do identify as queer.
Okay, excellent. Would you say that queer should be anti-racist?
It's tough to say what should be and what shouldn't be, and really having firm definitions. I would say all of this, just as a disclaimer, is my perspective of things and how I've perceived the information. But I would say everything should be anti-racist. So why wouldn't you that's just how I feel in general. So yes, 100% I feel like it should be. But I do understand why sometimes there might be different subsets or different races that feel like they have to create certain spaces because they don't feel welcome in other queer spaces. So I can understand the different perspectives, but mine personally, yes, I do feel like things should be anti-racist, and there should be less, I guess. Yeah, there should be less of that amongst the community.
That's fair. So I guess built into that then is kind of the notion that queer spaces can sometimes be racist. So have you experienced racism within kind of the lesbian community, or maybe even just within the broader queer community?
100%. I think it goes back to that intersectionality where masculine presenting women are already seen as aggressive, or the ones who are probably going to start a fight at establishment. So there's that. And then the fact that I am Black, I think there's also that other expectation in the community that we're going to be a little bit more aggressive. We're going to be a little bit more rowdy. We are not going to spend as much money because we don't have as much money. So I definitely have experienced that. And I think because I am so fair skinned, and because when people are drinking, they don't even necessarily will realize that I can't, I can blend in sometimes. So I think I actually do get a little bit more of an honest perspective, because some people don't even notice I'm there. So yeah, they're not necessarily speaking to me sometimes, but overheard, yes, 100%. And then I think a specific example, just on Church Street. This was years ago when I was younger, not saying it doesn't happen now. I just don't go out that much anymore. But we would get ID'd, and we would be 10 years older than some of the other people that were getting ID behind us. And it would be like, oh, this ID is fake. 100% real. I've been told my ID was fake, and they've threatened to take it and cut it up. And it's never happened to me anywhere else. Never. Nowhere else that I've ever been in my life except for on Church Street. So you can't help but wonder,
yeah.
Is there a coincidence there, right?
Exactly, yeah. And if you don't have a lot of statistics and this place that I've been to has done this over and over and over again to many Black people, it kind of feels like, well, I can't really make a case for myself, but it does feel like there is something, right? I definitely feel that. Absolutely.
At the time, that's how you feel. And then I've gotten older and I've heard the same exact stories from the same bouncers. We can describe people and say, yeah, that exact situation has happened. So, as I get older, I can definitely look back and see, okay, I can speak to my white friends that grew up in the exact same community, went to the same parties, and they had a totally different experience. They're actually very surprised. They're like, I've never even heard of this in my life. So, yeah, looking back, I can see that it definitely felt very racist.
Yeah, no, that's fair. Absolutely. Okay, so when you were younger, what was your understanding maybe of Blackness and queerness? Did you have to maybe suppress yourself because you felt like people around you were, a certain type of way, or felt a certain type of way?
Yep. So I come from a Jamaican family. I'm first generation Canadian. I was gonna say firstborn. I'm an only child, so yeah, technically firstborn still, but yeah, I'm first generation Canadian. And in Caribbean culture, and I think actually until this day, it's considered like anything gay is considered sodomy, and it's illegal in Jamaica till this day, I believe. So it wasn't a thing. Like it wasn't something that was spoken about. It didn't exist. If it did come up on TV, it was like, oh my God, change the channel, get this person off the TV. I won't proceed with the slurs, but things like that. Gay pride would happen in Toronto, and if we happened to be downtown or crossing, like the comments were absolutely ridiculous. They've come a long way, so bless my family's hearts. But at the time, like they were two things. Like gay was here and Black was here, and there was no way that they could ever be together. That's how I felt for most of my life. And then I would say around 19, 20, because on TV at that time there wasn't very many lesbians, much less Black lesbians. Like I think there was Ellen. That might have been it. So there was nothing to really see, okay, maybe outside of my family, outside of my friends group, this is okay. But when I did start getting onto the party scene a little bit, and there would be the one-off Black lesbian party like quarterly, maybe if you were lucky, and it was one party promoter at the time, like you had to go to this one event, you knew everybody there, was the same people every single time, but at least it was a little bit of like, okay, there's only a little of us, but there's some.
Yeah, absolutely. Has it gotten better? Like, are there like a couple of different places where you can go?
100%. There's a lot of different promoters, a lot of different DJs now, and specifically on the Caribbean scene, because that's also just a smaller subset of the Black scene where, music wise, there's the hip hop, there's the trap, there's the top 40, and then there's all the other stuff that you don't necessarily hear on the radio. You're starting to hear a little bit more. So even within that community, I mean, it's become huge. So
beautiful.
So, yeah, it's amazing to see over the last, not to age myself too much, but decade or two, it's changed a lot. So it's good.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that's good. That's good. Okay. So if I'm not mistaken, I'm pretty sure I heard you correctly. Your the 100 project has to do with uplifting Black queerness. Is it like Black lesbian like stud, or is it more just kind of general broad queer?
So general masculine presenting women, we want to include allies in the different perspectives, because some of it is the perspective of the non-Black community. How do we feel about these people? Why when we see the Black, or why when we see studs come into the club, we tense up, we're nervous, we already have this type of impression, or why are we not inviting them to more professional events? Why are these things not happening? So it's inclusive of everybody, but it is Black led, and the majority of our volunteers are Black. So it's very strong POC.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
So what led you to this work? Like, how did you get into it?
So this is a very long, drawn out story that I will try not to drag on too much about. I was in a relationship for about 10 years, and it ended, and it was very difficult for me, and it ended just before the pandemic. So it was sort of like, you've lived with someone for about 10 years, they're gone, now you're alone with your thoughts for 2 years, things you've never thought about since you were 19, you know what I mean? Yeah. And it put me in a position to realize that I didn't necessarily know who I was without my partner, and I didn't necessarily know what a good stud was, or what a good masculine presenting woman was. Like I can see, okay, when someone's a good father, when someone's a good mother, I know what a good uncle looks like, but what does a good me look like? You know what I mean? Because if I'm looking at TV, it's maybe at best like the angry principal or the angry police chief, but like majority, I'm some gangster, I'm in prison. Like that's what I grew up seeing, if at all. So I mean, part of that, and also just your own internal struggles. So really finding myself and talking to other people in my community. I kept all of these things to myself. I was very shy. I was very awkward, standoffish, like to the point where people thought I was mean. Like now people are like, I had no idea you were friendly because you never spoke. And I was just super shy and awkward and terrified to speak to people. So realizing that there's a lot of other masculine presenting women that are going through the same struggles. And it wasn't a flex thing. It's kind of like a lot of us are going through these similar things, and finding that there's some things along the way that might be contributing to this. I mean, everybody goes through their own struggle, regardless of who you are. But something as simple as one day, you might be a 14-year-old girl, you're in a little pretty dresses, people tell you you're gorgeous, guys are opening the doors for you. Literally the next day, you can look completely different. People are treating you like a dude completely. People are aggressive towards you. You know what I mean? People are telling you used to be so pretty. What happened? It's a switch. And you don't really get time to adjust to that. You don't really get time to like deal with it on your own because it's so visual.
Yeah.
So I think just being forced sometimes to be out even. Like if I was a femme, I always wished I was a femme and that I could have just been feminine because I could have decided when I wanted to come out instead of all of my life people being like, you look like a dyke. Like that's all I heard.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I feel that. Yeah. Do you think that like how did social media, did it play a factor at all with regard to the like your formation of who you are now?
So I actually had like limited Facebook with maybe 4 pictures of like a little bit of my face. That's how shy and awkward I was. And my girlfriend would threaten to post videos of me dancing and doing fun things, and I would freak, like angry, not funny freak, get upset. So before 2 years from now, I really had no social media presence and only started it for the project. But it's helped me a lot in just seeing myself because I don't look in the mirror a lot. I don't take a lot of pictures before now. I never took videos of myself. I never knew how I came across. So realizing that like there is a huge difference between me being shy and awkward and looking like this and when I'm laughing and smiling and people wanting to engage with me, and realizing that a lot of people's hesitation wasn't because I'm a masculine presenting woman. It's because I thought they were afraid of me because I was masculine presenting, so my face looked like that, right? So just really checking in, even on the way that you speak, even on like things like eye contact. So it has helped me a little bit, but I don't think it really triggered the journey just because I didn't have any presence at all.
No, that's fair. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, that's beautiful. I love that. Okay. Final questions. They're not dark. I won't say they're dark. That's not, I guess the only reason I say dark, I guess, is because the question is literally, have you been in a dark place before? And how did you get out of darkness kind of thing, or out of powerlessness, or like feelings of that, if that makes sense? Like, how do you move from despair into hope?
I definitely had other points in my life, like even way before that, that I would say might have been even darker moments. They weren't really as transformational because I just, stayed in the darkness. But yeah, definitely once I learned that, in my mind, it's something that you almost have to expect and embrace. I find a lot of people try to run from the darkness or try to avoid it or try to just do everything they can to make sure it doesn't happen. And I think this is life. We're human. It's going to happen. And the more you run from it, it's just going to hit you by surprise and it's going to be way more dramatic. So I feel sometimes, really looking into why you're feeling that way, addressing it, kind of putting logic to it sometimes and thinking like, is this even reasonable? Because sometimes you feel darkness, and then when you really boil down to the root of it, it's ridiculous. Like, no offense to anybody or myself, but sometimes you're feeling that dark, and it's like you're here, and you really realize you could be up here somewhere. Maybe not great, but it's not that bad. Yeah. So I feel like sometimes really just like investigating, like this is one thing that's upsetting me. This is 2 things. This is 3 things. What can I do about them? And how can I make myself feel better? Like it seems very straightforward, but in the moment, like we just want to run from it. Like even myself, I have to remind myself, like, okay, I feel upset. It's fine. What are we gonna do?
Yeah, no, that's fair. I mean, honestly, like the fundamental part of being human is having feelings, right? So like just being in those feelings when you have them, it's important. You're absolutely right.
And forgiving yourself too. Like if you aren't able to bounce back, normally I bounce back like this, but there's some moments where it takes me a day, it takes me 2 days, it takes me 3 days. And I tend to get more and more upset the longer it takes me. And I'm learning still to try to be patient with myself to say, you know what? Maybe this is a 7th-day bounce back. Like it's fine. I bounce back when I bounce back. So.
Yeah, no, that's fair. Actually, I remember there was a quote, and I don't even remember what the actual quote is, but I know that Solange, for example, and Beyonce, they were talking one time about like how their parents would say, you've got 3 days to feel your feelings, and then you better be back. And it's kind of like, okay, well, I mean, that's, I don't know that we can put a timeline onto, how we need to feel or what we need to do in order to get out of that, right?
I mean, I admire the thought behind it where it's like, okay, maybe set the 3 days, but if you don't make the 3 days, still be forgiving of yourself, right? You can have both.
Yeah, exactly. Don't beat yourself up, but like, set yourself some goals. Make sure that you aren't, dwelling if it's like something that you don't need to dwell on.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's beautiful. All right, so let's move a little bit into the present. Is your queerness, would you say that it's tied to any other parts of your identity, that like any other aspects?
The Blackness, obviously we did talk about a little bit, but even just being a woman. So again, because of the fact that my queerness presents itself as a masculine presenting woman, that's just how it is. I can't control that. It does, there is conflicts with being just like feeling like a woman. So there's a lot of things that, I might have a feminine mannerism, or, I might have cramps this month. So I never had cramps all my life, but all of a sudden I was living with a girl, and I blame her for forever that I caught them from her. But all of a sudden I started having terrible cramps, and like all I wanted to do was lay down and cry all the time. And it made me feel like less of a stud, because I felt like, I'm supposed to be this like what people expect of me. So things that are just inherently female, sometimes I felt like got in the way of, feeling like you wanted to be a stud and you wanted to be the biggest, baddest stud you wanted to be. So yeah, for sure.
That's interesting. So how do you know that you are cisgender, and how do you know that you're not like non-binary, or like does masculine woman, how does it represent you more than maybe tomboy?
So I think so I'll answer that in two parts. I think like I say masculine presenting only because it kind of, again, encompasses like the tomboys, the butches. There's so many different terms. Me personally, I don't go by some of them just because butch sounds so aggressive. Tomboy sounds like a child, like a boy. I feel like I'm 35. I don't want to be identified as a boy. So some of them, it's just based on the language. It really has nothing to do with like what it means to my gayness. So there's that. But also, I feel like I grew up in a world where there was only cisgender for most of my life. There was no other option. So I don't think it was ever a thought or a decision. It was just, that's what you are. Now I live in a world where, we kind of have some options, and there's things that you can identify with. And it's actually been said to me, one of my friends said, when you refer to yourself, you never say man or woman. You never say she or he. You always say they, that person, that weirdo. Like you always find a way to go around it. And it did have me thinking like, that's interesting. And I had to sit with it and wonder if I really felt like, okay, perhaps I'm non-binary. And what brought it back to me was the things about being a woman that I don't identify with are like being a lady or being beautiful. It's like society's idea of a woman. It's not that physically I don't feel like a woman. I love my female body. I love, like when you call me a she, it doesn't offend me. It feels right. It's just all of the other things like the darling and the sweetheart and all of that side of being a woman. So it's very difficult to explain to people, because people will be like, hey girl, and like, ma'am, and like stuff like that. And I'm like, I don't really like that. They're like, but you identify as she. I'm like, yes. However, I still don't like that stuff. So yeah, it's niche market, I guess, but
yeah, that's fair. Okay. I have heard, for example, that some people who are Black, who are non-binary and are women. And so I'm wondering, like, it's a specific experience to be a Black woman, right? And so like, that's what I'm trying to maybe get at, is that like, you can be non-binary and also have the experience of being a Black woman in the world.
I think you touched on something interesting where you said can live like an experience of this type of person. And I feel like a lot of the experiences we live in the world are based on how people perceive us. So me, like I get treated as a Black female a lot in Toronto, sometimes a Black male, but depending on if I have a hat on or whatever. But when I go to places like America, like I'm instantly Spanish. Like in New York, I'm Puerto Rican, they're talking to me in Spanish, and it's a completely different experience that I have there. So I feel like sometimes I felt like I was giving a certain thing and I was getting a weird reaction back, and I didn't realize it was more based on the way people were perceiving me. So I think it depends on where you are, what you're wearing. Like your experience could be different, and the way people treat you could be different day to day. And I do see it. Like when I'm in my work clothes, people treat me with respect. People are holding doors for me. Like I've been, looking decent. My hair slicked up in a high bun. I probably look a lot more feminine. When I have like braids and like a fitted, and I probably look more like a young Black male. Door slammed in my face. People are looking at me suspicious, clutching their purse. So yeah, and that's like morning to evening. That could be me at work, and then I just went out with my friends in the evening, and my experience is totally different.
That's so interesting. Society's so funny like that.
It's so crazy. And even I would say, the worst experience I've had with the way people perceive me was actually in Winnipeg. I was sent there for work, and I was in work clothes, like a leather jacket, like dressed decent, like thinking I'm fly. I'm going to go out to one of the little bars after work. And I started asking people like, hey, where do you go? It's like 7:00. It's barely dusk. And people are running away from me. When I say running, running, and I couldn't figure out what was happening. And a Black guy, he started dying of laughter. He's like, "You're not from here, are you?" I'm like, "No." He's like, "They think you're Indigenous." And I was like, "What?" I had straight hair at the time. He's like, "They think you're Indigenous, and that's why they're running away from you." And I was just like, I have never, and people followed me around in stores. I stayed inside for 6 days. After the first day, I just stayed inside. That's how bad it was, because I've never been treated so poorly in my life. So I felt like Spanish in America, I've been. Black in Canada, I've been. Indigenous in Canada, I'm sorry. It was literally a terrible experience. Like, it opened my eyes.
Wow, that's so
Yeah.
interesting.
Yeah. I never imagined it. Like, yeah, I can't even describe it. I'm sure you can see the shock on my face still. I was so offended at the way they were treating me.
Yeah, I can only imagine. My goodness.
Yeah.
Wow. How do you feel about queerness maybe in Canada versus in the States? Like, was it different going, between the two places?
I feel like the majority of the states that are in the northern side, fairly similar, but yeah, the southern states, there are some differences where it's mostly the stares. You'll get a couple comments. Like, it basically feels like maybe Toronto 20 years ago when I was younger. It's not terrible, but it is definitely like a little while ago, depending on where you are, but it wasn't terrible. I think they're a little bit more accepting actually of people that might look different, or maybe like things like body art. And our community will love to be festive and decorate ourselves.
Yeah.
So yeah, like I would see managers with like, specific example, a manager at a retail store had a complete naked person tattooed like on their arm, tattoos up their neck, and they were like, hustling the store and being like in charge. And I'll be honest, I've never seen that in Canada at like a generic retail store. Never.
That's awesome. That's actually really awesome.
Yeah, they were a little bit more, I think, accepting of things that are just like not the norm. But I think until you live there, you don't really know. Visiting, it's like, you're on vacation, everyone's nice to you, but until you live there, I don't know.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. So I feel like we can kind of move into a little bit of, we're transitioning from present to future. Okay, so yes, exactly. So what would you say to your younger self if you could?
Oh man. I would say be so much kinder to yourself and everyone else. If I can summarize it, I just was a very negative person, let's say, and I wasn't necessarily like a mean person, but just one of those overly analytical and not in tune with emotions. So yeah, be kind, love yourself, and love everyone else. I was like allergic to love and feelings. So yeah.
Yeah, that's fair. Yeah, and you got to be compassionate to yourself, right? Like, you got to be nice to yourself, because you have a relationship with you for the rest of your life, right? So it's hard, because I feel like queer people can definitely beat ourselves up about things.
Especially if you've been taught to do that, if you've been spoken to a certain way, it's really easy to do that to yourself, but people feel it. Like, now that I'm older, I can feel the difference between people who love themselves and people who don't. And I just want to be around the people who do. Like, you want to love them so much. So yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Exactly. Okay, so I want to know, who are you most inspired by, or do you have any queer heroes? Or even like, they can be like someone who's not queer, but who's your hero?
Hero is definitely my grandmother. She's not queer, but she is quite the tomboy nonetheless. She's like the type who, fixes things on cars and the doorknobs, like just totally cool. She also loves to cook and do all the feminine stuff too. But she's just my hero because she's always just well-rounded. And no matter what people thought she was supposed to be, or whatever box people thought she was supposed to fit in, she never did. And she was unapologetically her about it. So yeah, it took me a while to embrace that side of her. But yeah, I think that was very inspiring. I actually don't think I have a queer hero, and that's sad to me because, yeah, I don't. I've actually thought about this before, and a lot of people will mention people, but they weren't anyone who I felt like really did much for the community that I also identified with. Like, I know you don't have to identify with a hero, but for me, that's usually like, I want to see myself in my hero. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
That's the problem for me, is there's been some amazing people, but none of them that I really felt like I identified with.
Yeah, that's fair. Absolutely. And to be honest, your grandma, she sounds a little bit.
She asked her yesterday and she was like, nah. I was like, maybe if you were born here and in this day and age, but hey, who am I to say? I actually did an interview with her and I said to her, what would you be if you were born in this day and age? And she literally said, more of a tomboy like you. And I was like,
All right.
That's all she said. Sure, Grandma.
Yeah, I love that so much. Honestly, looking back on some of my relatives too, I feel the same way. Like, I honestly think that if people were a little bit more free to be a little bit more themselves, I feel like they would have been. And I feel like, you know, things would have been so different for them, and they might have. Who knows? Who knows? We can't, you know, look back, but whatever.
Sorry, Grandma, if your church friends find this on YouTube. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I'm just kidding.
We're of course just kidding. We're just kidding. Okay, so what I would love for you to do is describe queer joy to me.
Wow. I think queer joy is really closely related to freedom.
Ooh.
Because I feel like that's what stops a lot of us from feeling confident, like that sort of restriction, from feeling all the other things that are amazing and, you know, the festive side and all of those great things that we want to do. So I feel like, yeah, pretty much just being free. And I feel like I'm not alone in this, only because like when you look at a Pride festival, like there's something about it where people look like they have been like literally cooped up. Like even people like myself who have been out like most of their life, we still feel cooped up. And at Pride, it's kind of like you see the rush of energy. It's like we're all set free. So that's why I say that.
Oh, I love that. That's beautiful. Oh, yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. I love that. Okay, freedom. We love to see it. That's fantastic. Okay, so do you feel like, because like, based on what you even just said right now, it feels a little bit like there is some restriction. Like we do have to do some restriction. So how do you think that we can move toward being more free?
I think as a culture, just being authentic. I think there's such a range of personalities in our community. Like I have seen everything from all different kinds of people that if we were all genuine and authentic, there would be representation for everyone else under us. Like you wouldn't have to make an effort to be like, let's create a space for this. If we were all just being genuine and authentic and accepting of everyone else. So it seems very like kumbaya, but I feel like it's a day-to-day thing. Like even me, every day, like I make a choice to be like, okay, I can be this like hardened, postured person that's not vulnerable and don't take any risk, and it's so much less scary because that's who I was. Or I can show people that like, hey, like we're friendly out here, you know?
Yeah.
And maybe change someone's mind today. It's not my job, but at the end of the day, like taking that extra step is not gonna hurt, I don't think.
No.
I think it depends on your comfort level. Like when I wasn't able to be authentically myself, there were people who were. And so it's kind of like a give and take. Like if you're not in that space, no problem. But once you get to that space, then I feel like, okay, it's your turn to look back if you can and say, what can I do for somebody who isn't? So
yeah, absolutely. That's fair. That's a good way to frame it too. I like that. Because like there's all sorts of places for everybody in the fight, you know, and so we like if you can't necessarily be visible or be out or anything like that, maybe you can help to take care of the community that you have that is visible and is fighting on the front lines, you know. So yeah, no, that's beautiful. Okay, so I have probably like maybe 3 more questions for you. So first one is, what is your vision of society? What do you want to see in the future? Like, how do you see the future?
Wow. I feel like in the future, there's going to be so many different types of people. Like as we create more labels, as science expands, as we decide to cross like even more and mix all different types of generations, I feel like it's going to just be kind of like a melting pot of people. And I feel like in that sense, there'll be a little bit less segregation, I hope. I mean, we'll find some other way to segregate ourselves probably, but hopefully not. And, you know, even in the community right now, like fashion wise, when I'm looking at straight men and I'm looking at gay men, I almost can't tell the difference anymore. Whereas 10 years ago, you saw a guy in super tight pants or something bright, like he'd get made fun of, he's this, he's that, every slur. So slowly, I feel like we're all kind of merging into like one type of thing. So I hope that just creates a little bit less like hate and a little bit less competition. Like not even just hate, but just who's better than who and who does this better and who's known for this, like that type of thing.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so recently, Harry Styles has decided to not label his sexuality or his gender, anything like that. And he's just like, I think that labels are a thing of the past and we need to move past them, or that we are past them. And I'm just wondering, because like in some ways, some people feel that we are past them. Some people don't feel we are past them, or will we ever be past them? So like, how do you feel about labels?
Yeah. I feel like I have a unique perspective being like right in the middle of all this change, where the people older than me are like hard set with their labels. I'm a hardcore butch that's never going to change. Like, and then the people a little bit younger than me are like, you guys are so basic. What's a label? Why are you even calling yourself a stud? That type of thing. I feel like both sides should probably respect each other. And if you like your label, keep your label. If you don't like your label, don't have a label. And that's, that's how I feel about it, is just, as much as I know there's this whole respect the no label, and I appreciate that 100%, and I'm very respectful of everything, but I also feel like to give, you got to get.
Yeah.
So I do get a lot of conversation to say like, this is so unnecessary. Why is a stud? A stud means something to me. Being masculine presenting was a strong part of my identity for my whole life. It's something I had to fight for that you necessarily may not have had to fight the same fight for. So maybe you don't feel as tied to that label as I did, because I had to work hard for it. I felt like, whereas I felt like, you just get to be gay and happy now. So
Yeah.
I can understand both sides. And I honestly feel like people should just do whatever they want to do and be respectful of each other. Like, easiest way to go about it.
I agree. I'm here with you. I'm there with you. So what is one way that you feel that people listening or watching can make a difference within their own circles and networks and communities?
Okay, so one way I think is just telling people like genuinely things that you like about them. I know people say like, tell people you love them. Okay, yeah, okay, you love them. We hear that all the time now. Some people don't. I'm sorry if you don't, but like, it goes around, right? Like I think sometimes it's just generic. So I think really specifically telling people like what you appreciate about them, it just does something. Like it creates positive energy where that person brings it to the next person, and it kind of goes around. And it happened to me recently where someone out of the blue just randomly haven't spoken to them for 6 months, gave me like a one-line compliment, and I had the best day. I went around being nice to everybody, like for no reason. So I think being specific about what you like. And then I think also too is just like not expecting people to be too PC. So I feel like in our friends group, you may have a Black friend, a white friend, a gay friend, an underweight friend, whatever, different types of friends, right?
Yeah.
And I feel like we live in this world where everyone's expected to say something perfect, and a lot of people lose friends, or a lot of people are super offended by these things. And I feel like you're entitled to be offended, of course, but take in the history. You may have known this person for 8 years and they've never done anything wrong. They probably didn't mean to offend you, and they're on a journey. We're all on a journey. Nobody's an expert at everything. So as much as I may feel like I know something about something, there's 10,000 trillion million, whatever number you can think of, things that I don't know anything about. So I feel like just remembering that like nobody's an expert at anything anymore, because this world is evolving, especially with Blackness, especially with queerness, especially with all of these different conversations that people are now willing to have. So just appreciating that someone wants to have that conversation and they're open to learning. And being understanding. Again, not saying take any sort of verbal abuse or accept any nonsense, but maybe saying you educate somebody instead of just canceling somebody outright. I think we need a lot less cancel.
Yeah, we need a lot more compassion for each other, maybe. Like, this has been a beautiful conversation. I am obsessed. I'm so happy that we've had this conversation. Thank you so much. I do want to give you some time just in case, so that you can say anything that you would like to say that you didn't think that you got to say, or address something that was maybe said and I didn't continue to probe, or, that kind of thing. Is there something that you wanted to kind of add?
Shameless plug. We're a 100 project. If you want to follow more of the conversation, it's 100_project 2020. I forgot to tell you the Instagram. And we do some events. If this is posted before, we're having an event June 5th. Come through. It's free. Aside from that, I do think, just to like, along with my theme of my project, there are masculine presenting women out there that are going through like some of the similar struggles that I have talked about. I think like I can see it within some of us, you know what I mean? But it's not something I can reach out to somebody and be like, hey buddy, do you want to talk? So yeah. If there is anybody out there that just kind of feels like they want to shoot a basketball one day because they're struggling, and you don't necessarily have to be like, hey, I'm struggling. Or if you do want to talk about some of the things that, I've been discussing, and you just feel like you're the only stud or maybe no one else is kind of bringing these things embarrassing, like, I'm here. So yeah, reach out, DM me.
All right, perfect. Well, I guess that wraps it up. So thank you for being on our little YouTube screen, and thank you for being part of the UPlift community. And we are here for you always. Now you're part of Uplift. So
Yay! Thank you for having me as well.
no problem. It's beautiful. You are wonderful, and we're excited to have you. Thank you.
Awesome.